Imagine a timeline of English literature. Erase every single piece of writing authored by a woman. The major movements and academic milestones would remain largely intact. But run that same thought experiment on the history of France, and the timeline shatters. A massive gap appears in the national identity. This observation comes from the novelist George Eliot. She spent years analyzing her 19th century contemporaries, finding herself frustrated by the state of English female writing. To Eliot, these authors were failing because they were simply attempting to write like men. They produced imitations of masculine prose that felt like bad actresses swaggering around in male attire, ignoring the specific strengths of their own perspective. She argued that there is a sex in literature. Because of their differing rules and physical realities, women possess a distinct psychological and emotional lens. When applied to writing, this lens generates cultural combinations that men cannot produce alone. To find a time when this distinct female intellect was actually harnessed, we have to look past Eliot's England and investigate a strange historical anomaly in France 2 centuries earlier. 17th century France acted as a unique incubator, governed by a set of rules that prioritized female intellectual development. Eliot points to 2 main drivers. First, biology. She theorized that the Gallic temperament provided the high-octane energy French women needed to sustain continuous creative thought. Second, sociology. Unlike their English neighbors, French aristocratic women lived under notoriously lax marriage customs, which spared them from isolated lives of domestic drudgery. Forming relationships later in maturity, these women were thrust into real-world drama, navigating political rivalries, statecraft, and the high-stakes intrigue of the court. This combination of biological energy and social freedom provided the exact engineering requirements necessary to build the engine of French literary dominance. The physical mechanism for this dominance was the Salon, a new type of intellectual ecosystem hosted and controlled entirely by women. The hosts acted as social amalgams, gathering highly incongruous men, soldiers, politicians, and philosophers, and forcing them to interact in a single room. The Salon acted as a gravitational pull for heavy subjects like war and religion, but inside, hosts enforced a rule: debate with lightness and refinement. Dense academic theory was filtered and streamlined, becoming accessible and polished before reaching the public. By forcing male intellectuals to survive within this female-designed ecosystem, these women shifted the benchmark for intellectual prestige from sheer volume to clarity and wit. Madame de Sablé embodies this influence, a woman who rarely published under her own name, yet profoundly shaped the trajectory of French letters. She was a person of contradictions. She was a notorious hypochondriac who feared the slightest infection, yet she was also a gourmet obsessed with fine cuisine and the precise chemistry of a perfect ragout. But those personal quirks were secondary to her real talent, a razor-sharp understanding of human psychology and the secret replis, or folds, of the human heart. We see this talent in action during her collaboration with the philosopher La Rochefoucauld, who was drafting a collection of cynical aphorisms known as the Maxims. Sablé acted as his shadow editor. She used her insight to challenge his bitterest conclusions, smoothing out his jagged cynicism with her own more nuanced understanding of human goodness. Sablé's editorial fingerprints show how the collaborative female mind could take raw masculine thought and refine it into literature that resonated for centuries. Even in her old age, Sablé's intellect made her an essential confidant. She was the only person who could bridge the gap between political revolutionaries and devout theologians, advising both with the same judicious clarity. Looking back from the 19th century, George Eliot used Sablé's life to issue a warning to her own generation. Eliot argued that isolating the female intellect into women-only spaces was a mistake. Deprived of real-world material, women's faculties tend to waste away, spinning conceptual cobwebs in a vacuum. But she also warned that women must refuse to simply mimic masculine styles just to be taken seriously. Her conclusion was that a culture only reaches its full potential when women have access to the same fund of ideas as men, allowing a shared intellectual life to bridge the gaps that neither sex can fill alone.